Welcome to Jousor, which translates as Bridges, a one-to-one discussion with individuals of prominence and significance in the West that aims to find the common grounds, promote the friendships and affinities, and discover the realities and the facts behind the headlines. 60 years on from the Nakba, or the Palestinian catastrophe, and at a time when the world's collective eyes are focused on the events in the Gaza Strip, virtually no one amongst the high and mighty can properly identify a way out of the ongoing and escalating crisis that has engulfed not only the entire region of the Middle East, but has had a profound impact and effect far beyond. Today, my guest is one of the most prominent thinkers and speakers on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. His sincere, open and honest assessment of the situation through a number of publications, including The Holocaust Industry, Beyond Chutzpah and the Rise and Fall of Palestine, has placed him high amongst the most respected scholars and authors who have put their names, their reputation, and in some occasions even their safety at risk, as a consequence of speaking the truth. Being born and raised in the United States by Jewish parents who survived the concentration camps of Auschwitz during the Nazi Holocaust did not spare him from being accused of being a Holocaust denier, a Jewish self-hater and laughably an anti-Semite. Yet among hundreds of millions around the world, including Arabs and Muslims, he is seen as a courageous and honorable scholar who is also a great friend. My guest today is Dr. Norman Finkelstein. Norman Finkelstein, thank you very much for joining us on Jousor today. Let me first of all start by asking you about your own, this line that you are pursuing. When was it that you actually decided that this was going to be, you know, your direction? What affected you? What impacted on you to drive you towards this particular direction?
Well, there's a general cause and then there are specific causes. Generally, I grew up in a home which was very hostile to war for obvious reasons, given what my parents endured during the war. A great sensitivity to human suffering. And it was not something which was at an intellectual level, though my parents were very smart. It was a very emotionally charged home in which I grew up, in which, for example, I could say my mother literally grew hysterical at the sites of the crimes the U.S. was committing in Vietnam. So every night on television when the news would come on, and my mother was not at all given to self-dramatization, but whenever the scenes came on of the war, she would put her hand up like this, turn her head, and say, "Tell me when it's over." She literally, physically could not bear to see the sight of people suffering the way she had and the way her family, which was exterminated during the war. And so that was impossible to escape that. And it was in some form transmitted to me as well as to my siblings. On a specific question of Israel-Palestine, I became involved in June 1982 at the time of Israel's invasion of Lebanon.
Yes.
And I was involved in the picketing of the Israeli consulate in New York. And then at that time, certain discussion, I would belong to a Jewish group who was opposed to the war in Lebanon. And there were intellectual discussions, and one topic which came up with great frequency was Zionism, about which I had known very little. And I turned that into my doctoral dissertation.
Yes.
So now I had both a political commitment and a scholarly commitment. And then obviously I'm Jewish, so I had a personal commitment. And the three came together. And mostly I would say, as I went back and forth to the occupied territories during the First Intifada, and I developed personal attachments. And it became impossible for me, so to speak, to abandon these people mid-struggle. If I ever had those thoughts, which, to be honest, I didn't, but immediately the images of those people would, I could see them in my mind's eye, and I'm not going to leave them.
The fact that, you know, who your parents were, what they endured in Auschwitz and the Warsaw ghettos, you know, you're being Jewish, did you find that as being a catalyst, a motivator, a drive in your pursuit, or did you find that as a hindrance?
No, I didn't find it as a hindrance at all, and it was plainly the catalyst. It's inconceivable to me that you can tolerate the kinds of suffering that others have endured, in particular Palestinians, and be insensitive to it if you're familiar with the background of what Jews suffered during World War II. And, you know, the analogies are obvious. The building of a ghetto in Gaza. And I'm sure, I have no doubt what my parents would be saying about that ghetto that they built and the progressive decrease of rations, fuel. Those are familiar analogies. It's maybe not exact, but you know what? It doesn't have to be exact. Yeah. It's close enough to be barbaric.
And do you regard that kind of family, that kind of attitude generally, that kind of feeling of commitment to the suffering of the Palestinians and humanity in general, wherever they are, do you see that as being, or do you see yourselves as being in a minority within the Jewish community, particularly in the United States? Or do you think that it's more widespread than people are given to believe?
I think things are changing now. I don't think it's for the same reasons as what motivated me. In my case, it was basically, as I said, peculiar, maybe you can even say eccentric sensitivity to human suffering. But in the case of Jews generally, I think the picture is most Jews are liberal. They believe in the rule of law. They believe in these basic liberal Enlightenment values, basically because they've benefited enormously from them. They flourished in the United States under a regime of a rule of law and so forth. And now it's becoming more and more difficult for American Jews to reconcile these bedrock principles with what Israel is doing. Because there was a time where Israel was fairly successful. In fact, I take that back, very successful at concealing what it was, concealing the reality of its policies. But now that's becoming more and more difficult.
Because of the internet and the satellite TV age, is that why? Or?
I don't know if you can pinpoint it, but you can just register the net effect. The net effect is that severe criticism of Israel has broken into the mainstream, not marginal people like myself. I'm a marginal person, but it's no longer people like me, you know, it's people like Jimmy Carter. And the usual sorts of smear tactics that are used against people on the margins, Holocaust denier, anti-Semite, they seem to have an element of credibility because who knows me? But they don't work against Jimmy Carter.
Yes.
He's the most revered ex-president in our history. And so when you try those tactics against him, they don't stick. And so it's becoming more and more difficult for American Jews who claim to be wedded to liberal values to justify what Israel is doing, not just domestically, but internationally. So for example, when the National Intelligence Estimate report came out saying that Iran was not involved in the program of a nuclear weapons program, the whole world breathed a sigh of relief.
That's right.
There's not going to be a war.
Yeah.
The whole world except one country. And the one country is Israel, which says the NIE report's a lie, and we still have to attack Iran. Well, most American Jews are liberal. They grew up in the generation, give peace a chance. And here's this warmongering country, which has frankly become a crazy state, and which says war, war, war. And it's becoming an embarrassment for American Jews. It's not only an embarrassment, it's becoming a problem, because if the U.S. goes to war and the war turns into a catastrophe like Iraq, American Jews are going to be blamed. So for both ideological reasons and reasons of self-interest, they're distancing themselves from Israel. Israel is out of control. It's a lunatic state.